Special Operations, Covert Ops, Espionage, The Team House, with your hosts, Jack Murphy and David Park.
Hey folks, welcome to the Team House, episode 114. I'm Jack Murphy, here with David Park. Our guest tonight is Ray McPadden. We're really excited to have him here tonight. He served in 2nd Ranger Battalion as well as 10th Mountain Division. This is his new memoir that's just out, We March at Midnight. He also has a novel out called The Whole Mountain Burned. And we're just super stoked to talk to you tonight, Ray. Thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah, Jack, thanks for having me. I'm a big fan of the show. I love what you guys are doing. I'm a big fan of both you and David as people and veterans too, so it's a pleasure.
Thanks, man. You and Dave are having your 275 moment, a little bromance going on. I saw the little hearts coming off of your heads as you talked earlier.
I saw that envy kind of coming out.
You saw me turning shades of green.
That's right.
Which our background is shades of green, so it's apropos. Before we launch into the interview with Ray, I just want to give a shout out to our sponsor for tonight's show. It's Household 5. They make soap and chapstick and there's a beard oil as well that I use.
All right. So first off, as you can probably tell, we are very metrosexual men. We like to look nice. We like to smell nice. Household 5 is like, their whole thing is smell less ugly, which I'm all about because there's not too much I can do about all this. They're based in Fort Wayne, Indiana.
Veteran owned and operated. The
JTFO, Joint Task Force Operations box, is $31.25 and includes a soap for all 6 branches of the military.
And I used the soap to wash my nasty ass. It was really good.
The first time I used the soap, I got the tobacco and beechwood. What'd you get?
Leatherneck.
And then here's the Dirty Privates. It's a musky scent. But with the tobacco and beechwood, the first time I used it, I actually got soap up my nose because it was smelled so good. I was like, yeah.
Like the kid we can't give those scented markers to because you come with home with all the marks on
your
nose.
Well, speaking of scented markers, for all our Marines out there and Marine-like people, I'll tell you, this lip balm is delicious. You will put your crayons away forever. This lip balm is like all natural. It's beeswax, and I don't know what all is in it, but it is delicious. Beeswax, cocoa, you'll love it.
So
very kissable too.
Guys, you go to household5.com. That's household5, the numeral 5.com, and use Team 20 as your promo code on your order. What does Team 20 get you, D?
20% off.
20% off when you use Team 20 promo code on your order.
And smell less ugly.
So, Ray, if you're a fan of the show, you know what my first question is. Tell us what your origin story is, man.
Yeah, Jack, I grew up in South Texas, and anybody who's from Texas, football is religion down there. So I definitely got swept up in that. I played high school ball, really high level. I loved it, and what I liked about football was you could work hard and then you could see a result, right? Like it could translate over onto the field, and I love that about like sports in general. So I played ball growing up, and I was not I wouldn't call myself a jock. That's of course a negative stereotype. Like I was always a really shy person, very introverted. I remain that way today. Get a lot of social anxiety, and like I was in high school, like I was scared of girls. I was really scared of girls, and I met my wife when I was 14. So we were both 14 years old, and she picked me. She was the aggressor.
Yeah.
So that made life easy for me, man. It was the best thing that ever happened to me. We've been together really ever since. So, and that's just a little bit about me growing up.
And had you always wanted to be in the military? You had a family history of, people in the military. Was that something you always wanted to do?
Yeah, I was always interested in it, and I didn't know exactly like what I wanted to do in the military. Like, I didn't really have a sense of like the different branches of the military, and then Marines or Army or Navy. Like I wasn't totally sure growing up, but my dad was a career naval officer, so seeing him come home in uniform all the time, and growing up, with military bases, close by, it was always something that was on my mind. Yeah.
And you decided to go the officer route. We're not going to hold that against you.
He didn't go to West Point though, did he? Really?
No. I'm not a West Pointer, man. I went to Texas A&M, fairly big like military school. But you got that good mix of like real actual college, being like you could be a real college student too, which I think is good. I think it grounds you better as a human being, and you avoid some of the pitfalls of the kind of the pure West Point experience.
Yeah.
So yeah, Texas A&M for me, Jack.
All right.
And when did you graduate from Texas A&M?
2004, like Christmas 2004.
So
I graduated, and I started, maybe jumping ahead on you here, but I started the infantry officer basic course like 2 weeks later.
Right. And I thought it was funny in your book, you mentioned why you chose the Army over the Marines. Do you remember what you wrote?
I sure do, because somebody was like, oh, they got night vision goggles from Vietnam. That's what you're going to get in the Marines.
Right.
They're right. They're like this, this, David, they're kind of the stepchild of the Navy.
Oh,
right.
Yeah.
So they're getting all the hand-me-down shit and, secondhand stuff. And, so it was like, hey, the Army has it pretty good. And, I was like, I knew about like Rangers and Green Berets and Delta, and that stuff was, those like storied units were always really appealing to me. That was like, I wanted to go that route, like the special ops world. And, the Marines, unfortunately, they have MARSOC, right? But I think they've sort of always struggled to have that like really high profile special operations unit that tends to attract, a lot of attention. So yeah, it was the Army for me. I'm glad it worked out the way it did.
Yeah. So it did work out. You got your commission, and was it Knoxville? I don't remember where. No, where did you go for like where did you in process? I know you went to drum first, but right?
Yeah. So I went to Benning, right?
Okay.
As an infantry officer. So we all go to Benning.
Sorry about that.
So I did airborne, I did Ranger school, I did I don't know, something. There was like one or two more in there, and then of course the infantry officers basic course, all at it was Benning for me after college, before drum.
Right. Now were you married to your wife at this point in time? You guys have been together since you were 14.
Yeah, we got married, so we were dating like very seriously, but we got married like right after I graduated from Ranger school. I went back home, and we got married back home. We kind of eloped, and then we went up to Fort Drum together. So we'd been married for like 2 weeks when we got to Fort Drum.
How did she respond? I mean, obviously the military and what it meant to be in the military, especially as a spouse, changed very much on 9/11. And here, she probably knows you want to go in the military, but then while you're in college, 9/11 happens, and now you're going into this wartime military. How did she respond to all that?
She was always incredibly supportive. I think for her and for me, her name's Elizabeth. Like, I think for Elizabeth and I, we knew like that was the trajectory I wanted to be on.
Right.
and she knows what she was signing up for. But like, no matter what, like it's not real until it's real.
Right.
You know, where I think there was like, it was still like kind of this abstract thing, until I had orders for Afghanistan. And you know, she was honestly like pretty upset about that. And I didn't tell her till later,
right,
that I actually had orders to go to Iraq. I was going to, well, not to Iraq, but a unit that was just coming back from Iraq. And as a young infantry officer, I was like, no,
right,
no, you don't go to a unit that's just coming back. Oh my God. Like, you talk about being irrelevant.
right.
You know, like, dudes are all salty, and, you know, everybody's got their CIB, and, you know, they're larger than life, man. And then you're the new second lieutenant showing up to that. And I was like, and then, I ended up in Iraq, but like, for me, I always wanted to go to Afghanistan. Like, I joined the infantry. I went that route after 9/11. Like, I wanted to fight. Like, I wanted to kill bad guys. I didn't want to screw around. So I wanted to get over there as quick as I could.
I think it's a good story, because you wanting to get over there, when you showed up at Drum, you walked into the office of the chief of personnel.
Yeah, right. So I totally out of line and I don't like, I guess you're just dumb enough where, you do stuff like that. You're outside the chain of command. I just walked in the S1. It was a female colonel, I remember. And I said, hey, I want to go to Afghanistan, and I want to go like whatever the next plane taking off is, I want on it. And she was like, I think she was expecting me when I came in there to like try to get out of the deployment, because the war had been going on for just a little while, and like, you're starting to see like in popular media and on the news, you're starting to see, especially coming out of Iraq, lots of just ugly headlines and stuff. So I think she thought I was there to try to bail on a deployment. And then, I think I surprised her with, wanting to deploy as soon as possible. And she cut me orders right there to go to Afghanistan. So I got what I wanted. I got exactly what I wanted. And it was just a few months later that I was, I went over there.
And two parts to that story that really struck me was, one, you didn't just tell her you wanted to go to Afghanistan. You sat there and basically gave her your DD-214 to date. You gave her your resume. You listed off the schools you had been to. You sold that. You sold that.
Yeah, I'm standing there with my shoulder, with my Ranger tab on
right.
Still got the tab right there. I'm pointing that at her and standing as tall and big as I can be.
I'm Ray McPadden, and I'm here to vaporize hostiles.
Right.
That's right. Yeah, like so stupid, Sherry. Like, oh my God.
Right. And she's like, sucker. Yeah. But what's so funny is all that bravery, like all that, and then what did you tell your wife?
Oh yeah. So, for her, you're right. We didn't, it was a long time before I really told her, I was like, I got orders for Afghanistan. Like, it's like, it's crazy,
Right.
So I kind of downplayed it. I just said that, this is kind of how it worked out. I didn't really let her know that I was, campaigning for it the way I was.
Right.
And she was upset at first. But she kind of knew, we both knew it was coming, but it was basically within like 2 months or not 2 months, like 2 or 3 weeks of us getting married, that I was going, hey, I'm going to Afghanistan. And, and for her, it was like, well, how long? And the Army was doing, 12-month rotations back then, it was like a year. And that's, again, a year is like, until you've done a year-long deployment, that's totally abstract.
Right.
That doesn't mean anything.
Right.
So
right.
She was it was interesting, but we had just long enough where we could kind of learn how to be married and get to know each other some more and kind of like adjust to actually, truly living together and being husband and wife. We had a little bit of time to do that, before I left. And it was it was fun. It was also like, it was pretty intense. Like the emotion of like knowing that I was going over there, bubbled up a lot.
Right.
So it was, I talk about this a little bit in the book, and it wasn't that all that pretty. There was a lot of like fighting. Like
right.
we're not necessarily the couple that you would hold up as the poster of a beautiful marriage. We were like, it was rocky as shit, man.
Right.
It really was.
Well, I mean, and that though is pretty common. Even like before 9/11, like one of the things in the Navy, because they do deploy so often, is it's very common for couples to fight a lot before deployment, because they're sort of like creating that distance in a way. It's not necessarily healthy, but it's like how we deal with it sometimes.
Yeah. Oh yeah. There's all sorts of like interesting, like psychological things going on, I think, with couples that are sort of bracing themselves for it. Mm-hmm. and don't really know what to expect. And there's, I like one night, Elizabeth, like we were in a bar and she like went and started a fight.
Right.
For me to fight a dude, and I was like, I got kind of sucked into the trap she laid, but like, it's just crazy stuff, man. Right. Screaming at each other, and nobody's hitting anybody, but like, right. Like just real emotion on display. And then you're also seeing in that environment, right? Like a military town, like is really interesting when like the whole like military is at war, where there's all kinds of women running around too, or in men in some cases, right? Where like the husband's deployed, or the spouse is deployed, and they're, you see people, doing extramarital things a lot, man. Mm-hmm. And like the communities are small, and word gets out, like people, you kind of run into the same people a lot. And so it's intense, man. Like, long distance relationships in the military. And what's depicted often is like, marriages going down in flames, or like, Joe marries a stripper and then stripper takes off with all his money,
Right.
And that's real. That kind of shit happens. I mean, I don't know like how common that truly is, but I think everybody in any unit like saw like that happen to somebody's buddy,
Right.
So.
Right. The fact that probably everybody in the infantry knows somebody who is married to a stripper is probably not commonality amongst civilians.
It's not uncommon.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, relationship choices are like you're not always, your head's not, in the right place. Right. And there's people too that are, I think especially in like the big military towns where they're sort of like almost like preying on the active duty, where it's like, hey, not necessarily about ripping, it's not always about like ripping somebody off who's going to deploy, but some of it's just like, hey, the soldier's my ticket out of here.
Right.
Like, I don't want to be here.
Right.
This sucks, get me out of here. And then as soon as I get my free move out of all this and kind of get on my feet somewhere else, then
right.
move on to what I really want to do. And you're not part of that equation. Right. So, there's a lot of like naive young people getting used, and again, it's not just the guys, there's obviously, kind of goes both ways, man.
Yeah, for sure.
So let's talk about this deployment to Afghanistan. Tell us, what the mission was like, what the train up was like, and, prepping the head over there.
The funnest thing I did, like getting ready to go over there, was we went to tracking schools where we learned how to, like actually track people in the mountains, like how to follow a sign and how to like close the distance on people. A lot of things in the mountains. We did a horse packing and like course on like how to just like work with mules and donkeys and horses, and like, because we knew like where we were going. We were going to Konar province, to the Hindu Kush mountains, like way up in the mountains. So we were trying to do things that would sort of get us ready for that mode of fighting. And I think the train up was really, really good. Obviously, a lot of like ruck marches, a lot of like fitness stuff. And Fort Drum, it's got some good like terrain. It's got some hills. It's got a really, really cold, severe winter. So we had, I think we were more or less ready for where we were going, or as ready as you could be. Nothing could totally get you ready for the real, like those savage mountains in Afghanistan.
Right.
And, I don't think anything can totally prepare you for that.
Yeah.
So that was the train up. And then, for Elizabeth and I bought her a dog to fill in for me. I thought that would work fairly well. And, it seemed to go pretty well. And then, but I couldn't wait to get over there. I really couldn't. Like I was dying to get over there. And like the question obviously that you have before your first deployment is like, you're like, again, like I've had the training, I want to do this, I'm ready for it. But like, you never truly know. It's like that little nagging voice in your head of like, am I truly ready for this? Like, and how am I going to do like the first time rounds fly? Mm-hmm. Like you don't know until you've been there and you get into it. Right. So like that little nagging voice was in my head, and it was in my head even, for many years. Right. So it was like, it was just kind of getting louder and louder as I like leading up to the deployment of like, am I really gonna, not just ready for this, but like, do I have like the instinct and like the nerve to really do this?
Am I going to measure up?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Right. That's you're dying to know.
Right.
And, you could kind of look at the other vets, like the dudes, and this is where, again, this is 2005, right? For me, 2005, 2006. So like, there's a lot of guys in the units now who have been on tour. So you're kind of looking at them and you're like, well, he doesn't seem like that big of a hard ass. Like he was in Iraq, and he's, like you kind of measuring yourself against the guys that have been there already, and so there's all that, there's a lot of like mutual kind of measuring and like guessing and second guessing.
I think that's very, very common, very common for, a certain type of person, especially people who are like kind of driven towards special operations, which you were eventually, but for that sort of mentality. So where did you guys deploy to? Like, what was your arrival into Afghanistan, your introduction to Afghanistan? What was that like?
I think we came in through Jalalabad at first, and then the first big operation we did was basically, we went into the Korangal Valley and the Shuriak Valley. So this was right after Operation Red Wings, and I think everybody's familiar, or many are familiar with that story. And Marcus Luttrell
go back a few episodes and listen to the Tony Brooks episode of the Team House. You can get the lowdown on all that and the Rangers who did the recovery for it. So so you came a little bit after that time frame.
Right. And so that was like, all this stuff's connected, right, Jack? So we said, the Army kind of said, now we're going to go into this terrain and we're going to kick the enemy's ass. We're going to go in their backyard now and we're going to own it. And so I was part of the first unit to, basically establish like a permanent outpost in the Korangal Valley. And so, you could kind of, the whole Operation Red Wings event was obviously a big driver behind some of that. So we were in the Korangal, so big bad mountains, and very much like off the, you like felt like you were just totally off the map. You're just way out there, and we were all on.
Take a moment to describe the terrain, because we talked a little bit about this with Wes Morgan when we had him on the show to talk about the Peck Valley. But I mean, Kunar and that whole area, when I've never been there myself, but when I listen to you guys talk about it, it sounds like, shit your pants type terrain. Like, oh my God.
Yeah, it is. The terrain is, it's extraordinary. Vertical slopes, cliffs, big mountains, 11, 12, 13,000 foot peaks, valley bottoms in many cases are maybe like 4,000 or 5,000 feet. So just very extreme, like vertical relief. And then, heavy forest up high, and I've heard, people on this show talk about like Pacific Northwest type of forest, big conifers and pines, and just beautiful, man. I mean, truly, truly beautiful. And yeah, incredibly severe. The terrain alone was taking out lots of people, with just people like falling off of cliffs, like walking around in the dark on a 50-degree incline with 120 pounds of, guns and ammo. I mean, it's crazy. It's just insane. And, it was also just wildly beautiful. I kind of struggled to compare it to somewhere in the States, certainly nothing on the East Coast even comes close to it. There's parts of the Rockies that I think have some of that like really extreme terrain. But it's, the thing that always blew me away was, the Afghans, I mean, the people like live there. And there's not like huge population centers. It's like kind of far flung mountain villages. These people really are, because of geography in these mountains, they're very isolated from the rest of the world. And that's how they want it. So I was blown away, Jack, by the terrain. I loved it. I thought it was beautiful. It's also incredibly savage, but it just has this heroic like beauty to it. And it's the Himalaya, right? So anybody who's seen, climbing shows or, anything about the, that part of the world, it's just the western tail of the Himalaya. So it's the real deal over there.
And how did you guys even like begin to cope with that as infantrymen and operating in such a harsh environment?
It's like I said, like we kind of did the training for it, but like your first like movements at night in that kind of terrain, like under night vision, are they're a total this is a total mess, man. It brings out like the little kid in everybody, where like guys are just getting so broke off and
this is bullshit. Why are we doing this?
Yeah. Like the complaining starts and dudes are just like the rucksack flop, is just all over the place. And, we had people like quit on movements, like straight up quit. And not like, it's like, shit bag, like, that dude's quitting on every movement. Like, no, like good people that were, or, at least solid dudes who are like, I can't. It's like, it's physically, I'm done. I'm just completely exhausted. Like that, it was like bringing that out of like young, highly trained infantry. So those first few movements it was sort of stuff like that. And then, as an officer, right, like, you were doing, it was your job to kind of like, put missions together and assess like what was, realistic for guys. And, obviously you don't want to just completely break everybody off and then have to medevac dudes for, because they're so smoked that they're getting injured from terrain. So, it took it took a little bit of like calibration to kind of figure out like what was realistic as a movement. And then the other thing too was like, we did get used to it, right? Like it was the first mission's always a total abortion, but within 2 or 3 weeks, you get your legs under you. And then like, your fitness level is incredible. It's those are, that's the best shape I've ever been in my life. You could just straight up run up a hill with 1,200 rounds of machine gun ammo and everything else on you. So we got really, really fit really quickly. And I look at pictures from back then and man, I'm like, dude, you're just like no fat whatsoever. You're just total, just muscle, man. And not muscle, but like
Yeah.
You know, that kind of wiry
Sinew,
muscle,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. You're just straight up, like, no fat on you. And then, you know, the pictures as the tour goes on, you start to look more emaciated. You're like, okay, those dudes look like they're starving to death.
Right. Right.
But for a little while, you were like, you take your shirt off and be like, fuck, no fat, none.
Ray, I think this is great for us and for our audience because we have a tendency to focus a lot on special operations and intelligence. And in both Iraq and Afghanistan, special operations had a very sexy mission. You know, you're generally back at your fire base at night, rolling out, you know, taking helicopters out to hit your targets or, you know, whatever. But conventional, those dirty, nasty legs were seriously out there humping and hooking and jabbing. And I don't know that gets a lot of attention.
That the public really gets it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, David, I love that point. I think it's an important one, man, is that, and I know, like, I could speak with authority on this, right? Because I had a foot in both worlds.
Right.
And I could tell you 100% that being a line infantry guy with Marines, Army, whatever, in Afghanistan was way harder. It was way harder on, like, just conventional line infantry than special ops, man. Special ops, you know, a lot of times you had a helo to the X or to the Y, you know, you're to get you really close to where you wanted to go. Or, you know, you're going to go out for like a night or maybe a week tops.
Right.
Whereas the line dogs, man, they're just every day, man. They're living in a fire base, you know, a platoon fire base. You're either on guard or you're freaking humping, man.
Right.
That's it. So, yeah, you're not getting like
that's a 12-month grind. That's not a 3-month in and out.
Right.
Yeah, and we did, and so we ended up getting deployed or extended. So 15 months. We lived out of our rucksacks, like fighting, like in foxholes, just shit conditions for 15 months. We were in the field for 15 months, man.
Right.
No joke.
Yeah.
No joke. There was no break. There was mid-tour leave. Total mind fuck. I'll talk about that when I get to it. And then there was there was like transitions here and there, you know, like for like we got to go to Camp Blessing one time to do our laundry. And that was about as good as it got. So yeah, so having done 3 tours with the Rangers, and like one tour with conventional, you know, 10th Mountain, that 10th Mountain tour, man, was the hardest thing I ever did in my life.
Yeah.
It really.
When you look back on it, though, Ray, I mean, maybe there's a tendency we all have to romanticize these things to a certain point. But do you feel like in those 15 months you did get to experience the exhilaration of true leadership, being a infantry platoon leader in that sort of environment, as austere as it was? I mean, like, it sounds like you guys got your man card. I mean, in the process of all of this.
Oh yeah, it was. You couldn't ask for better conditions for somebody who really wanted to fight.
Right.
We were out there basically like platoon and company size elements, completely on our own.
Right.
You know, it was like basically it's senior NCOs, lieutenants, and captains like really running a war.
Yeah.
And you know, like. You don't see anybody else, man.
Right.
You're just totally out there, like, yeah.
And you weren't
it was awesome.
I'm sorry, yeah, and you weren't just at, because you know, this leads into like the first big mission, and you know, we kind of talk about the idea of measuring up in the man card because that comes into play in your first operation out there. You know, you're out there in a patrol base doing patrol base activities for what, like 3-4 days?
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that operation and like how it started and what happened?
Yeah, we had some like our first KIAs in our battalion, and so you know we had good intel of like where some of that activity had originated, and so we went up into and this is before we really like lived for a very long time in the Korengal. We kind of were in the Korengal, and then we got assigned to go to a mission in the Wadapur Valley, which is also another, you know, very notorious area. So I went in, it was my platoon. We basically air assaulted in onto this ridge line, and we were supposed to, hit back at some of the insurgent groups that were responsible for these bigger attacks down on the Pesh River and that had killed our guys. So we're up there, and we know the enemy's like active all over this area, and we're looking for them. We're running ambushes, like straight up Ranger School patrols, man. I mean, it was badass, like, ambushes, movement contacts, like all that cool stuff. But we just can't find them, like we can't quite find them. And, we've got a sign out there, we kind of know, we're in the area, but anyway, they ended up finding us. And I still, just like diagnosing that, I'm not 100% sure, man, how they kind of slipped in just at the right time. But the Afghan, the sort of, the enemy in that part of Kunar was like notorious for this kind of thing, right? Where you're like, even if you're super dialed in and you're alert and you're doing all the right things, you're aggressively patrolling, they still have a way of finding you and kind of catching you at the wrong moment. So they came up on our patrol base. And I think the principal thing I did wrong, right, was I actually kept our patrol base in the same like general location for about 3 days. Mm-hmm. And so that was just long enough. So that's like, that would have got you failed out of Ranger School right there, man. Fuck that one up bad. You don't keep your patrol base more than 24 hours in one location because it can't allow the enemy to pinpoint you. Mm-hmm. But I kept it there for about 3 days. And there was a few reasons I did that. I won't necessarily like get into all the like why we, because it'll sound like I'm rationalizing things.
I don't know, because I don't think you mentioned it in your book, but I'll just say a why so that it doesn't look like you're trying to save face. When you're doing movements like that in that kind of terrain, picking up and moving a patrol base is another major event. And it's hard to keep your guys awake, alert, fit to fight.
And they're all getting dehydrated,
if you're just
around.
Beating them up every time you move, because in Ranger School, you can move, 10 clicks or 5 clicks or whatever and set up another patrol base in a few hours. But in a place like that, a few hours might get you down the side of a mountain, and it might be like 600 meters. So, I imagine that might be one of the reasons.
Yeah, it's an incredible expenditure of energy to pick up all your stuff when you're living out of a rucksack and move. And so we were tied to like one HLZ helicopter like resupply point. Like we had really one that was viable, and we were sort of tied to it. So, here I am. I'm going to go ahead and explain why I did it.
Yeah, no, please.
Was right. So I was like, I don't want to put us like too far away from our resupply point, right? Because all I'm doing is making it just super difficult for us to come and get another 5 days of food and water and batteries and all that other shit we need. So I said, we're going to stay kind of in this area. And the way I had it in my head was, okay, we're getting our resupply basically in 24 hours. So on the 4th day, and that's when and then we'll move the patrol base. Like once we're all resupplied and we're not tied to the HLZ again, then I'll move the patrol base. And that was basically, I'd planned to move the next day, and that night we got hit, really, really, really hard.
Well, so and Ray, here's the thing though. Had you moved the patrol base and then sent guys out to get the resupply and they would have gotten hit, you would have said, I shouldn't have moved the patrol base. Those are the decisions that leaders have to make in combat, and everybody can Monday morning quarterback it, especially the people who make the decisions, right?
It's tough, right? Like there's very rarely like a clear, like black and white, like you're in this just gray zone all the time, and nobody's giving you feedback. Nobody. Like it's, like you got your platoon sergeant, you might have some really solid squad leaders you can kind of like really have like a good like tactical like deliberation with, but it's not like there's some, your company commander's right there with you, or some super salty, battalion commander and sergeant major there kind of going, this is the right thing to do there at LT. So it's totally your call. It really is. And there's no right answer, man, but you can't stare at it, right? You got to make a call and you got to execute. So yeah, I appreciate you pointing that out, David. And just for both you guys, Jack, like I haven't had like a conversation at this kind of level of detail for a really long time, man. This feels good. So thanks for that.
Yeah, of course, man.
We appreciate you, man.
So
we appreciate
tell us what happened though that night. I mean, Charlie got in the wire.
No, so it was like right at dark, right? Classic like Afghan guerrilla tactic, right? Like they kind of hit like right at stand to like last night, kind of late in the night, or kind of as it was getting dark, right? And we had a fairly good position tactically. Right, like where we weren't, we were on a ridge line, and there was kind of humps in that ridge, right? So they weren't like way up above us, which I was in a lot of firefights like that, where plunging fire down on the top of your helmet. But man, they got in close. So I mean, just classic, attack with good support by fire element, machine guns, RPGs. And then they had a maneuver element that came in and got right up on top of us, man. So we were throwing hand grenades.
Wow.
And it was nasty. I mean, it was, and what we and tactically, like the way we operated in Afghanistan, like, we throw squads out there. And because a lot of the contacts really were, they're kind of machine gun fights, and they weren't close in, like you weren't thinking a lot about getting overrun. Like that's not how they necessarily fought. But in this particular case, they brought everybody they could get on the horn for probably 500 miles, it felt like. And they came after us, man, and tried to just run us over. And, it was a really intense firefight. It really was. Yeah. So throwing grenades and, everybody's in the fight, man. The whole platoon's like throwing down, and I'm the lieutenant. I'm shooting, which is like, I think I was breaking a rule there.
So like the PB is like going to get overrun. It sounds like.
Oh yeah. So the patrol base, man, is
shit.
Like they got that maneuver element in where they were coming to just take us out. So came all the way into machine gun range. We knocked him back. And that's when I got wounded from a rocket propelled grenade, and so it hit a tree like this. Me and one of my team leaders were using this little skinny tree, man, because we kind of got caught. Like I was checking positions, right, like what you're supposed to be doing, but I kind of got caught moving between positions, and the only thing was like, and man, I was like, there's getting shot at, and then there's like. They're shooting at you. Right.
There's accurate fire. Right.
Yeah. And it's you. You're like, that fucking gunner has me dialed in, man.
Yeah.
He's trying to kill me. Like that. There's that kind of fire. Right. That's like truly, that's who you just like, I'm not moving. So anyway, so me and my team leader, Langmaster, we were like hiding behind this little skinny tree, and then not hiding behind it. We were shooting, but we were using this thing for cover, man. And we were like right on top of each other behind that thing. So we just didn't have much room. And then, this RPG, man, hit the tree like dead on, right? Like it detonated, within like 3 feet of us, right? Like it hit the tree kind of up higher, and we're like in the prone shooting. And then, so we're in the fireball, like we're inside the fireball. And, like, I just remember, it's like white flash and like, the fire, like the heat of it, and we both got kind of thrown and, just, yeah, man, it was just nuts, it was crazy. I mean, you're like, at first, obviously you're like I'm definitely lost some body parts from that one.
Right.
I don't feel it yet.
Right.
You kind of do the class, like you kind of see it in the movies,
Yeah. Check your balls so they're still there.
Yeah. Okay. I got my balls. I got my legs. And you kind of come back to it, man, come back around. It's like, and then you can hear the fight again. You're like, oh yeah, I just remembered that I'm about to get overrun on a fucking mountaintop in Afghanistan.
Yeah. Yeah.
I gotta do something about it. I can't just lay here and be like, oh dude, I got shrapnel all over my body, So that was like my first big fight. I've been in contact before in Afghanistan. Like we'd had some little firefights, some little stuff. But like I said, it's getting shot at, man. Pot shots, little pulse machine gun fire here and there. There's that kind of getting shot at. And then there's they're shooting at me. And then there's just straight up getting a whipping.
Right.
Superior firepower, overwhelming firepower from the enemy.
Yeah, this is like Viet Cong hitting the fire base type stuff. This.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a wild. That so few of these stories ever kind of really made it out to the rest of us is kind of stunning.
Right, and what I think was interesting about it too was where there are a few of those overrun stories. I can't remember what's the battle. It was in Nuristan. They made the movie about it. It's an awesome movie. But
Restrepo, yeah.
Well,
the Restrepo is choreographed too, right?
Yeah. So, but they're you're in built up positions.
Right. You're not in a fire base.
Yeah, you're not you're in a fire base. Dude, we're in Ranger graves.
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
You're in a patrol base.
Trying to hold down. Yeah. Anyway, so it was wild, man.
So what happened after you almost got blown limb from limb?
So I pulled it together and, was heavily concussed and you don't know it, right? It's you see this all the time on football games on the sidelines, the concussion protocol. We weren't doing the concussion protocol.
Right.
It was you're kind of loopy, man. But it was dude, we got to do something about this. And we maneuvered, man. We knocked off the enemy assault element. We went and pushed back. We pushed into them and knocked them off the attack. And I think that's when it kind of crumbled for the enemy, right? Where they were all right, it's not going to work out. We're not going to be able to overrun them. So I think at that point they're all right, we don't want to just do, a drawn out fight up here. So they ended up withdrawing at that point. So then I went to, mortars, artillery into that mode, right? And so the idea was, okay, we'll cut off escape routes or, just try to hit them on the exfil with 155s. And, that's kind of where we went next. That and then, casualties, right? So we had casualties, myself included. We had two other guys that were seriously hit. And then 2 additional guys that were lightly wounded. And that was the first time I saw so Sergeant Langmesser, good dude, just great American. He was next to me when that RPG blew up. He got a shrapnel bath way worse than I did. And man, he was seeing him, seeing this super solid dude. And he was I remember, how pale he was and just kind of the look on his face, and it shook me up, man. Not only was I pretty messed up, but seeing a really strong dude, looking like he wasn't gonna make it. He ended up being fine. He came back, but it shook me up. And then one of our guys, man, he got the back of his foot basically blown off. And so he lost a lot of blood, just hit him kind of in the heel and made a huge mess. And so anyway, man, it was cleaning up the casualties. And then I was absolutely certain based on the nature of the attack that they were coming back. I was dude, they have so many fucking dudes. There's no way they're not coming back. They're going to try again. I was 100% convinced of that. And so we put, it got real dark. And then, it started to feel better. It was okay, we, now we're under night vision. We're doing pretty good now. And so I put an ambush out. I was incapacitated. I could not walk. So I had a squad go out.
I want to interrupt you real quick here, if you don't mind. Has the medevac come in yet?
Yeah.
Okay, so there are a couple things that we need to talk about that I think that our viewers should know. One, when you ordered the medevac, what was Hire concerned with?
Oh yeah, they kept asking for enemy casualties. Classic, like Hire, man.
What's the body count?
Yeah, they wanted enemy casualties. And
right. You guys are still kind of in the shit.
Yeah, like how the fuck
like
do I
you're calling these medevacs and they want a KIA count so that they can like put, write their OER or whatever.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's like classic, like, some, I don't know. Yeah. The disconnect between, right, like the field and like Hire and whatever, like silly ass reporting.
You did the right thing though and got on the radio and was like 150 KIA on this objective, right?
Yeah. We
kicked their ass, man.
Yeah, he's just like, just say something to him to like get him to leave you alone. I'm like, dude, I got urgent signals, man. Like, what do we? Like, oh yeah, I need enemy KIAs. And then I spent a lot of time in Afghanistan. I'm going to do
please.
Thanks for bringing that up.
Sidebar.
We spent a lot of time looking for bodies for like. We call it a battle damage assessment.
Right.
And I never had to do it in the Ranger Battalion, but we did it in 10th Mountain. And I think a lot of like conventional guys have probably had that experience of like, go find the bodies, like go count bodies. And that's always going to be, I love my military experience. I'd do it over again in a heartbeat, but that's the one thing that, man, you start getting, you want to get guys upset and, ready to kill people in the chain of command, man. That's go count bodies. That'll get you. So anyway, yeah. So that's what I remember. That there was a lot of questions about that, and we eventually got the medevac.
There's one more. Yeah, there's one more on the medevac because we're talking about measuring up, and we're talking about man card, and we're talking about your desire to prove something to yourself, right? So what did your medic on station tell you about the medevac?
Yeah, so I'm messed up, man. I got shrapnel wounds. I'm concussed.
You're bleeding?
My eardrum is completely gone.
Right, you're bleeding out of your ear.
I didn't necessarily know at the time. Right. And so I ended up I can't remember what the platoon sergeant exactly what he's doing, but I ended up calling the medevac in. And the medic, Doc Anthony Vaccaro, awesome dude, 2 silver stars. This kid, 2 silver stars. He was killed in the tour, but he says, "Hey, you're going out on the medevac. Like you're a casualty. Like you got to go." And I was like, "You can't call your own medevac in. Like, no. You can't call your own medevac."
Right.
And I never saw that written anywhere as a rule. Nobody ever told me that.
But I'm pretty sure.
I just knew with all my heart that was a shitty, like, you can't do that. You can't call your own medevac in. So I was like pretty belligerent with my medic that I wasn't going out and that I was staying. And my platoon sergeant, he didn't like that. He didn't like me staying either. It's just like, hey, you're a liability at this point. Like, this kind of hero thing you're trying to do. Like, we're not interested. And, we, obviously being the ranking guy on the ground, I got my way and, I stayed out there and, I thought it wasn't just like my ego, but like, I felt like we got hit really hard and, I felt like for the platoon, the guys that were there, that it was the right thing to do to stay out there with them for like through that night, especially where I was, I just had this sense. I was like, they're coming back. Like, we're not done. Like, this is a battle and it's not over.
Right.
So it was like this, I can't.
And so it did improve the morale of some of the men when they saw that you had stayed behind.
They did, man. They were pumped up and I didn't even think about that. I told you, I thought about it in the sense of like, wouldn't it be, what would they say about me if I left? I kind of thought about it that way, but what I didn't expect necessarily was that they saw that and they were like, that's the LT's a good dude, like the dude's solid. Like it actually lifted them up.
Right.
Where I was kind of thinking about it as in a negative way, but it actually lifted them up.
Right. I think something that's really important that you said and really insightful, because I think a lot of guys feel that but don't know how to express it, is you said you hadn't felt you earned it. You hadn't had your moment.
Yeah, and that's where it was like, right, David, like that nag, like I talked about before, like that nagging voice in your head, man. You're like, do I belong here? Am I legit? Mm-hmm. How am I going to do? Like all those kind of questions when you're looking for validation, you're looking to kind of make that like rite of passage. And I just didn't feel like, I could say I sort of got, what I wanted quite yet.
Right. And there's the added burden on you as being the leader that your like what you do from the moment you get injured until whatever happens sort of sets the template, or the morale sets the stage.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And I think it was like some of it was, like I wasn't all 100% there.
Sure. I feel you.
Right. Like I was still doing stupid shit. And then like Doc gave me like painkiller, he gave me, I don't know, I think it's morphine, right? Like he gave me a shot because I was like, oh, dude, I got shrapnel in me. Like it hurts, like I was like moaning and shit, and yeah, but you like you can never forget that they're like, your guys are like watching everything you do,
right?
Everything,
right? Everything.
Like that's like rule number one is, they're always watching you. So, I think I did the right thing, and like staying and like continuing to like make tactical decisions and try to kind of maneuver the platoon. I'm glad I did it.
And you mentioned the two guys got shrapnel, and that was actually Doc and the other guy. And they actually what they
did. Yeah. Well, yeah. So Doc got he got some shrapnel. Billy Sirks, the platoon sergeant, got some. I think he got some too. And they're up there. So Anthony Vaccaro, right? He's the medic. He did some crazy stuff in that firefight. He basically shielded the kid that got the back of his foot blown off. And he shielded him like from enemy fire, like basically like covered him with his body. I mean, just like straight up, hero shit. And got a Silver Star for that. And and then he got a little bit of light shrapnel, and then they were like picking the shrapnel out of each other with like a pocket knife.
They're like in the med tent cutting each other up, trying to get the shrapnel out.
Yeah, like it's crazy, man. Like good, some of the finest human beings I ever met. That's who I was up there with. Yeah.
So take us from this point, the medevac leaves and they're, everybody's doing their thing until like the next evolution when you actually do leave.
Yeah. So, it ended up being about 24 hours later and it was the resupply bird. And, I did my platoon sergeant, right? Like it's, rule number 2, it's like always listen to your platoon sergeant. And he was like, it was morning and he was like, hey, you are a liability. So he did talk me into it, but that night the enemy came back. Mm-hmm. They came back. And so our ambush patrol, got the drop on them. And it was, I think they may have shot like a little too early, quite honestly. Everybody was scared.
Sure.
And that's just how it was, man. I think they, instead of maybe like, let them get in the kill zone. It was like, there's a dude, I see him on my night vision.
Yeah.
let's let it go. We're going to open up. So they came back and we broke, we sort of got it, an engagement, and then that was it. That was the fight was over. And essentially the next day, I think it was, in the kind of mid morning, kind of noonish, somewhere in there, I ended up going out on that helicopter that was coming in with our resupply. So the like prudence did sort of win out for me in terms of like, it was like, hey, we're again, like back to this terrain is so crazy. I mean, super fit, healthy people can't even move in it. And I was obviously had shrapnel and was like incapacitated basically. So I did get evac the next day.
And just because it's so personal how you write it, and again, so insightful. When you were going out on that bird, or when you were passing by your guys, you mentioned somebody give me permit, like somebody acknowledge and give me permission to do this, right?
Yeah, I remember looking at him and thinking, like, I was looking for something from them, like saying it was okay for me to leave, because I still, I didn't feel good about it. Mm-hmm. It was like, hey, I got through the night, like I felt like I got through this tactical engagement, but I still didn't feel good, and I was kind of looking at the platoon, and thinking, you're just looking for something from them,
like give that nod.
I saw was like a nod, or like, hey, LT, like, something, and I just remember them looking tired, and like they were kind of like, hey, we got the resupplies coming in, we gotta get our everything together, and we're gonna hump all this shit back up the hill, and they were just, it was business, it was business for them. They're like, whatever, LT's gone, that's it. So yeah, it was not the kind of goodbye that I was looking for.
Yeah. And again, the way you write it, I think that anybody who has been in anything even remotely close to that gets it. They totally understand. Like I feel like I'm giving up on my guys. Somebody say it's okay, that I'm not giving up on you, that you get it. Right.
Yeah. Tell me something. Even if you're like BSing me, just tell me.
Right. Yeah.
Make me feel better about this.
Yeah.
No, I didn't get that, man. Didn't get it.
Tell me to fucking duck next time. Tell me something.
Yeah. And it was just like, hey, man, these guys, they're just getting ready for the next mission, the next phase of this mission, and I'm out. I'm out, right? And yeah, that's just how it is.
Yeah. And that had nothing to do with their regards of you. It was just they're task oriented, they're mission focused, task oriented, and ready to move on to the next evolution. Right.
And that's what you want, ideally.
Right.
That's what you want. You want guys who are not like going to you have casualties, and it's like, oh God, we're crying. We're all like, we're falling apart now.
Right.
We're going to get hung up on that. It's just like, all right, man, I got to cross load their ammo. I got to keep moving.
Right. So they fly you to Jalalabad or Bagram? Where do they fly you to from there?
So I went to Asadabad first.
Okay, ABAD.
Kind of a quick, so like urgent surgicals. It was like ABAD was the first thing, or like trauma. I wasn't urgent surgical, but so that was first stop, and then Bagram.
And was it Asadabad or Bagram where you fell into the healing tenderness of an army doctor or nurse?
Yeah, that was ABAD, and like, ABAD was like, man, a lot of like, this was the time where like it was hot, man. That whole sector was super hot. So like, there's this female doctor had probably seen a lot of casualties,
right?
And I remember she was like really attractive, and I hadn't seen a woman for like a long time,
right?
And I was,
right,
and I was.
She was really attractive.
Yeah, and she had her surgical mask on. She had these like green eyes, and I was like, oh my God, and I could smell her. Right. I could smell her from across the room, like that. And you're like grunts like coming out of the field, like you just, dude. I was like, I smell like burned skin and ass, and I just remember I could smell her, like I could smell her soap, and yeah, and I wanted her to be like comforting, and I wanted her to be nurturing, and I had this whole thing going in my head of what it was supposed to be like,
Right.
From my caregiver, and
Right.
and she was, again, that like very cold kind of like doing my job. I'm doing my job. You're just another casualty, like coming through. Like I'm oriented. Okay, I got to get this metal out of you, and then I got to get you on to the next, like, kind of the next station in this wounded train.
Not to mention that every casualty that came through flirted with her. Just
Exactly. Yeah. It's like, it's like hitting on the waitress at Hooters.
Right.
You're like,
Exactly. When there's only one waitress at Hooters and you haven't eaten for 4 days.
so yeah, she did a good job, man, but she wasn't really interested in getting to know me. So then, the next stop was Bagram, and my wounds got infected, which is exactly what Doc Vaccaro said was going to happen. He's like, these are going to get infected. It was just being in the dirt, I mean, metal going into you in the first place is not good.
Right.
Sitting there and then kind of still hanging out in the dirt for another 24 hours. And so my wounds got infected. Jesus Christ, did that hurt. Like, it was like my leg was on fire. And then, so anyway, that, and then my eardrum was like blown up. So they sent me to Germany. And, I was in Germany for a little while. I remember being on the plane though, right? Where it's like, all right, like if you get hit, everybody gets a Purple Heart if you get hit. But some dudes get hit, like you lose body parts, your kidneys fail, like, and comparatively speaking, I was like not like serious, not like nearly as seriously wounded as some people who, again, it's going to be with you for the rest of your life.
Sure.
And so I remember being on the plane back to Germany, they were flying me to Germany. I remember they had me right by this Marine, this kid, man. And I know he was young. You could tell, he was like right out of high school. And he got hit, like, bullet hit him like right below the plate. All the organs failed, like, that kind of horrible, like catastrophic wound. And they were trying to keep this guy going, man. And, I'm sitting there on the flight, like looking at him. And, that kind of messed with me, man. Where you're like, you start to, again, you're kind of like, did I really earn this? Did I really earn my Purple Heart? Sitting next to this guy who's, took one in the chest,
Right.
So I did, and that started out like a whole, like being in Germany was just a whole bunch of soul searching,
Right.
Where you're removed from your guys, you're removed, you're like, what's happening to them? They're still on the mountain. Like, I want to know, if if they're okay. I want to know if there's been more contact. There's, you're kind of separated from the battlefield now, so you don't know what's going on. And I was in a hospital and, in a little hospital room and just totally isolated, man. And I just, it was very, like, psychologically, it was extremely difficult to sort of deal with that, be separated from a unit, not know if like kind of like not have that like moment when you were leaving your platoon on
Right.
whether, like what they really thought about you.
Right.
And then, just kind of the isolation and thinking about too, right? I think this is really important is you get hit and then everything gets a lot more real after that, where you're early on. And this is very common in like war stories, right? Where it's like the naive rookie, you haven't really, and then it's like you get in contact, you get in the shit, and you start to understand the stakes. But then, getting hit, takes it to a whole nother level, right? Where you're like, oh, dude, like it can happen to me, like the whole basis of the infantry is that nobody thinks it can happen to them. Otherwise, you'd never do that kind of shit.
Well, that's the thing is everybody knows that you can die in combat, but we also all know that it's not going to happen to us.
Yeah, you're like, no, no, not
Right.
me.
I know. I've had this conversation with people in like subsequent years and like all the weird, stupid stuff I did throughout my life, whether as a journalist overseas or as a soldier in combat. I never once thought I was gonna die. Like I never seriously believed that would happen to me, which is completely irrational, makes no sense whatsoever. but nonetheless,
Yeah. You need that. Otherwise,
Right.
you can never like run into harm's way. And
Yeah.
both
Right.
you guys run toward gunfire. And yeah, it's like, yeah. So it doesn't work if like once that part of your brain,
it could
Kind
be
of.
me. It
Yeah.
could get me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I pretty
Like-
much just run towards rocks these days. Man.
yeah. Which Dave, I know I saw about what happened to you, man. I thought that's insane.
It's it is what it is. It's nothing compared to what you went through, though. I mean that's the legitimate truth. It was a rock, not an RPG. Let's be real. I mean, so so I know that like this is you talk about being in that hospital room and your mind you're there alone with your thoughts and I know for one of the things for you was should I have moved to patrol base? Were you sort of projecting that onto the guys that they were judging you about that and about the decisions you had made? Were those things you were worried about?
Oh yeah. Oh yes. Yeah. Yes, I was. I was. Like there's a lot of like literature out there about young officers. Getting people killed, getting people
Sure.
hurt.
Sure.
And I was kind of feeling like that guy. Where I was like, those casualties, that's my fault. I'm hurt, it's my fault. Like this is
Right.
tactical decisions that I made. I'm the guy on the ground. It's on me. And that was haunting me. And it
Yeah.
still does.
Yeah.
It still does, man. That shit doesn't ever go away.
Right. There was something else that I think that really is, one, a testament to the strength of your marriage that you guys are still together, and also where the Army really fails families. Because what's going on with your wife right now while you're in the hospital?
When I got evacuated, the Army did its thing, right? And the notification went out of like Ray was wounded in action, so she got a call. But the call was just he was wounded. He's been evacuated. He's going to Germany. That's all we know. You'll hear more later. That's basically all I told her. And so they left it completely open-ended about what had happened to her. But when I got to Germany, so she's like freaking out, right? Like who? You get this like vague report about your loved one, and then it was so the idea was like that. I was gonna like the family member kind of was gonna close the loop, but what I had decided when I was in Germany was that I wasn't gonna tell her that I was hit, because nothing good is going to come out of me telling her, like she's just going to freak, man. So I didn't tell her. I was like, I don't fucking tell her. Like, why would I do that? And so I just thought she wasn't going to know about it. And I was like, I'm going to go back to the battlefield. Like, I'm not going home. I knew that for sure. Like, I was like, I'm not going to, like, I'm going to stick with it. But anyway, she'd been notified. So she went 2 weeks maybe with like no information, like just because the Army thought that I was going to call her, and
You thought nobody had told her anything.
I thought, no, yeah, I was like, she doesn't know, so she's never gonna know. She's not gonna know. So that's, yeah. So finally I got in contact with my my company commander, and I was like, hey, I'm gonna heal up. Like, I'm coming back. Like, don't give my fucking platoon away. Like, don't give my platoon away. And he was like, hey, by the way, have you called Elizabeth? And I was like, no, why? Like, don't tell her, okay, sir? Like, don't tell her. And he's like, dude, she knows, man. Oh, she knows. He's like, you haven't called her? And so anyway, I freaked out, and I called her and got her on the phone, and she was obviously very upset because she didn't know what the hell was going on.
She did for 2 weeks, right? For about 2 weeks.
Yeah, it was like 2 weeks, man. She just didn't. And so I told her what happened. I was like real honest about everything. And I was like, hey, I'm kind of looking for your blessing to go back too,
Right.
And she was supportive. I mean, I was like, hey, this is what I want to do. And, she was like, are you sure? And I was like, yeah, I'm sure. And just like, all right, so that's kind of how it went. So she had my back even, and she pulled it together quickly. The thing with Elizabeth, she's definitely a character in the book, man. And she's she was always there. And it was important to me to kind of have her be a real character. And I think for kind of the relationship side, there's a lot of like spouses who are like cardboard cutouts in a lot of like kind of military stories. And it was important to me to have like a spouse actually be a real character and kind of representing some of the, kind of the fact that it's not just you that goes to fight and that other person's really, they're fighting beside you.
Right.
That's how I saw it.
Yeah. We've talked about this before with other people on the show and whatnot, that their job is actually harder than ours because we're out there living our dream. We're doing what we want to do because we want to be there doing it.
And they don't know what the hell's
They're
going
the
on.
one who has to carry on with their life while we go like
Take care of the kids,
Yeah.
pretend everything's cool.
yeah, you know.
Yeah. If you were to flip that, I couldn't handle it.
No way I'd be out like that.
Oh yeah. No way, man. I'd be a nervous wreck.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just totally. I like have a psychological come apart.
Now,
I really. Yeah.
Ray, I trust you. You're a trustworthy guy. But let's be honest. You kind of have a history of dishonesty. You kind of finagled things with your wife when you got your orders cut. What did you tell the doctors your plan was when because they didn't want to send you back to Afghanistan? And what was it exactly you told them?
Oh well, I said I'm gonna get myself assigned to I'll get light duty at battalion. I'll just I'll be like the assistant.
Making coffee for the colonel.
Yeah, I'll go be like the assistant supply officer. I think our supply, some of our supply people are in Bagram, which is basically the States. So I told them I was going to get myself light duty because they were it's the whole thing with the whole Germany especially, right? It's like these doctors they're not assigned to combat units,
Right.
So it's like what a doctor would really do, like, oh God, we're gonna look
Right.
after you well. Whereas, up on the line,
Take a Motrin, rub some dirt on it.
That's right. Yeah. You got a battalion surgeon. They're like, well, yeah, you're like, oh dude, I got shot in the leg. You're like, yeah, walk it off.
Yeah.
So they were trying to help me. They were trying to send me back. And I said, oh, I'll get light duty. I'm going to be good. And, so they let me go back, even though my ear, I basically had lost, use of one ear.
Right. They're like, no loud noises, and don't get it wet.
Which, that lasted about, 3 hours once I got back. So I definitely, lied to get myself back to the battlefield. It was nagging at me of like, oh God, they're going to give my platoon away. And I was like, I can't, I gotta get back. And I did, I called my commander, a couple times, 2-3 times just to, just make sure he wasn't having second thoughts about, me coming back. I was like, I'm coming back. Cause right. What would usually happen is, once you're in that wounded pipeline, you're going to the States. That's it.
It's the Freedom Bird, right? It's the Freedom Bird.
Yeah, man. Everybody's jumping on that thing. Once you're on it, man, you're golden.
Yeah.
So I think I was, I knew enough to know that it was like, you got a free ride home and you're done. Like you could just go hang out. Even, if you get better, you just go hang out on rear D.
Right.
But yeah, so I was, that was not an acceptable outcome for me.
So you fly back and have a long convalescence back in Afghanistan. You fly back to Afghanistan, right? You have a long convalescence while you're there. No?
Yeah, we I think we got orders, and it was within, being there. I mean, I was back for maybe a half a day, and so it was sort of back to the Korengal Valley, and the rest of my company was out there, and it was like, hey, we need your platoon back here, and so get your asses back out here, and so we hopped in Humvees basically, that day or the next day, and drove from Jalalabad airfield to the mouth of the Korengal Valley, which is, again, some of the most dangerous driving in Afghanistan with IEDs, and
yeah.
we were just doing it in broad daylight, just cruising, and then got to the mouth of Korengal, and had to sort of ford the river, which didn't go well. Again, it just sort of back to the theme of the environmental theme, right? Of like just the terrain itself, the rivers, So we had to cross this very swollen river in our Humvees, and I knew looking at it was not going to work. I was like, oh shit, we're gonna come back here so I could drown. And we basically, like, my Humvee, platoon leader, you're up front, right? First vehicle in the movement. And we got into the river, and then just got about a third of the way, half the way, maybe third. Yeah. And then swamped the engine, and then the current started pushing us. And, it was just, yeah. So anyway, back to my ear, I was like, ended up swimming. We all had to kind of swim for it, and then basically lost the vehicle. But that night, like, my company, like, you could see the fight, like the firefight, like one of our I'm pointing, right? It's over there. That night, we actually, like, one of our squad patrols got hit, and we had KIAs down, like, further south on the Korengal. And, it was just like, my company commander's like, come on, man, get out here.
Yeah.
Get up here. Like, we need the help. And that was, it was like, roger that. That was like, hey, that's our unit, man. And, like, that's our AO, and we should be there. So, we got jammed up a little bit getting out there, but we basically arrived within, about 24 hours of me being back in Afghanistan. We were pretty much in the Korengal. So it was, there wasn't a whole lot of downtime once I got back.
Ray, can I ask you, everybody, there are all these high level lessons learned in Afghanistan, and why we didn't win, and we would have won if we would have done this and whatnot. But, Army doctrine for infantry is what, 3-to-1, right? Three
1/3, 2/3.
Yeah. Three friendly to every one bad guy. When you have a place like the Korengal, where it sounds as though they were, like, continuously undermanned, especially for those types of operations, that type of environment, the number of forces that the Afghans could bring on you. Did you ever find out why there was so little effort or focus put on that area, and why you were consistently sort of undermanned?
I think at first, David, we didn't know how strong the enemy was.
Uh-huh.
I think we knew Al Qaeda was very active there. There was, we had been told actually that a big part of the September 11th attacks had actually been planned there, like in the Korengal. Like, some of the operational planning had occurred, like, in that area. But we believe that Al Qaeda, like, our presence there in the valley, had kind of pushed out, like, the bulk of the Al Qaeda presence. And so a lot of it was, it was more of kind of the regional and, like, kind of the local level Taliban was who we were fighting. So, like, at first, I don't think we really understood how big the enemy's force was, and then sort of like contact after contact, it started to, right, like that's how you get intel, right? Is contact. We started to realize like how big that enemy force was in that area, and then they were actually bringing, like, as kind of time went on, it was classic like guerrilla warfare, right? Where when we went in and did this big operation, lots of guys. And they saw, okay, they're bringing everybody to the party, and they all bailed.
Right.
And then once the big operation was over, it was like, okay, now a company is going to hold this whole area. They all came, like everybody came back. Everybody and their fucking mom came back. And then it was, so it was like the summer went on, the firefights and the hits on like the outposts and the platoon positions just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And it got to the point where, like, at one point in the Korengal, like, I had my own position. We had another like platoon level position, and we got in such a gigantic like fucking dick dragger of a firefight that the colonel, actually our battalion commander, said like, reconsolidate everybody in the company. And like, no more, we don't want like platoons trying to like have their own positions anymore, because everybody was really worried about like how many of those motherfuckers were running around. Yeah. So but back to your question, David, like why we weren't willing to push like more people there. I mean, I think a lot of it was just like, like the kind of overall troop levels in Afghanistan. Right. We just didn't really have that many people there. And I think we fell into a lot of the same traps that the Soviets did of kind of like having these very far-flung remote positions. It was kind of like, we'll put a platoon and we'll put a squad in every valley, and obviously that's very easy to take advantage of when you're just scattered that widely.
Right. And that the next major event kind of in the book, in your operations there, I really illustrates what that lack of force did, right? The lack of troops. I'm thinking about the convoy. Oh yeah. So I mean, you're trying to guard. You're trying to be everywhere, right? And you can't be, especially in like mountains like that, where the effect of mountains, like what you get in the Hindu Kush, is it's like a big equalizer. Like a lot of your technological advantages are sort of canceled. Just for example, like a fighter plane, like a fighter jet. Like for a fighter jet to actually support you, like they like trying to circle over a really, really tight, like mountainous valley like that, it's almost impossible, like just the way it all works with the physics of it. So it's this great equalizer, like terrain like that, where it comes down to the foot soldiers. And, so anyway, we're trying to kind of be everywhere and cover everything, and we're trying to keep ourselves supplied because our aircraft are getting shot up, right? They're shooting up the helicopters, and so the aviators get real skittish, and they're like, "Hey, we don't want to like fly into the Korengal anymore." We're like, "Oh, dude, but like, what are we gonna do?" So we start trying to do ground resupply, and anyway, we have a convoy that we're supposed to be doing. My platoon is supposed to be doing overwatch along this huge, like 7-8 kilometer section of this road. And we end up, we have multiple missions, and we have, so I had to pull down a position, like an overwatch position, so that I have enough bodies to go do a raid. When I pulled down this overwatch position, the enemy, like that night, basically got a bomb in the road. And then laid into an ambush, like laid into about a mile of hillside. So just a giant linear ambush. And then sprang that the next day, complex attack started an attack on this convoy that, again, my platoon was supposed to be sort of providing overwatch so that this type of stuff didn't happen. Right.
So yeah, another like tactical like quagmire, David, where it's like there's no there's not really a right answer, because the raid that I pulled guys off of a position to go do a raid, right, because we had, very good intel. There was a whole bunch of Taliban like up in this village. And I think ultimately what happened is it was in fact true.
Right.
But by the time like kind of the intel got to us, they were no longer in the village. They were actually like, that was the ambush.
Right.
So we went chasing them up here, and they came down here.
And the raid was actually preemptive to hit them before they could get to the convoy.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
And that was the goal, right? But just, again, friction and the fog of war, like
right,
it just didn't kind of work out the way it should have. So they ended up like, we went chasing them way up the mountain to this village, which means we weren't watching the road. And so that night they got in, they dug a bomb into the road, and then they laid into ambush and then hit the convoy the next day. We had come back down because it was a dry hole, and we were like, damn, like we felt like we were like, yeah, somebody was up there for sure, but we don't, we're not totally sure where they ended up. And so the convoy's coming up the road, like we've reestablished our positions, and then the enemy springs the attack on the convoy, kills, three guys and a girl, a young woman, a young female medic, in the first kind of big volley of fire. So my platoon had reassumed a position kind of right in the middle of all of it. So it was, it turned into like another, very, very large firefight where, there's the convoy down on the road, there's my platoon on the hillside, and then there's the enemy up on the hillside too. And so there was sort of a period where, it was just rounds just going everywhere. And we ended up, I think because my platoon, we were, basically in closing distance on the enemy, they pulled off really, really fast once they realized, like, we started, shooting at them, and they realized, holy cow, there's actually, infantry like right here on this hillside right below us. So I think the attack would have been far, far worse, because they were dug into, in effect, a mile of this road where, the vehicles are moving really slow, and then just sort of classic ambush tactic. They took out the first vehicle, and like the road was so narrow. It's these really scary mountain roads where it's just like cliff on one side, cliff on the other side. They were crippled. I mean, they couldn't move. I mean, so they would have just chopped that whole convoy to pieces. They would have killed everybody.
Yeah.
So yeah, that happened. We ended up chasing the enemy up that mountain, but we didn't obviously protect, we had people get killed in the convoy. So,
but you're also talking about over a mile of a stretch of road that your platoon wouldn't have been able to cover the whole thing anyway.
Yeah, I mean, we were supposed to be watching about 7 or 8 kilometers of road, and it's again, the reality is like, it's just you probably needed a company.
Yeah,
you
right.
probably need the whole company,
right,
to be able to do that, right? Just because of how that terrain is,
right.
And we didn't have it, right? So we're you're right. It's like you do the best you can with what you have in the moment, and it wasn't enough. And again, it's one of those things like moving the patrol base where you just you kind of get stuck on it, right? Where you're like, what was the right thing to do? Should I have really pulled those guys off for that raid? Should I have left them there? Should I have gone up the hill with just a squad? Again, there's not necessarily a right answer to that.
Right. So you chase them up the mountain, you start getting rounds on target from your mortars or your artillery, and then command decides to send you some help.
Yeah, we got aircraft. We did. We rarely got, we rarely got aircraft, but I remember we got Apaches, and that obviously, was beneficial, and we pursued the enemy, with the Apaches basically, providing, supporting fires, and I was directing their, kind of the Apaches. But the enemy ultimately got away.
Was it the time before or this one where you got the French fast movers?
Oh yeah. So this is right. These are all, they like blur together for me.
Yeah.
For sure.
I get
like,
it.
They, so the next, so like after this big attack on this convoy, the enemy, so they realized, oh my gosh, there's actually an infantry platoon that's just totally like out here, away from the main company outpost. And so they, in the course of that whole big firefight, realized where we were,
right.
where we were operating. So the next day, I think it was basically the next day, they came after us on the, kind of in this position we were in. And I knew they were coming. Like you start to, like at this point, like I'd start to actually develop like real instinct. And that's one of the things that I thought was, really interesting, right? Was going from, just like you're just riding the wave. Like you don't know what's going on. Mm-hmm. You really don't. Everything's moving super fast, and it's totally overwhelming, to being in control in a firefight, right? Where you're like, actually like, oh, okay, like here's this tactical maneuver we need to do. And if we could do this, like this is going to make a difference. Mm-hmm. To actual, and they're right, this is the varsity shit, is like predictive power. Right. Like, you actually know what's going to happen, and you can anticipate the enemy. Like, you know what they're going to do. Mm-hmm. And then you can like be out ahead of them. And that's what I was looking for early on. Like when I got that mission where I got wounded and we were chasing those dudes and I couldn't figure it out, like I couldn't figure out like how to kind of line it up and get the enemy dialed in. And, right. And so that was one of the things that I think was actually, as part of like actually gaining that experience and getting like real combat instinct is like you start to actually have predictive power. So I knew that they were coming back. So we basically arrayed ourselves, got everything lined up where we were like ready to take them on the next day. And that's what happens. They came back and we were ready for them, and we kicked their fucking asses and killed a good number of them in that engagement. So we got fighter planes, French fighter planes, totally worthless. They were not helping at all. And it was part of it was terrain, but then there's there's that dichotomy of like the people on the ground and the people who aren't. And at one point they're like, well, hey, we want, I'm like, okay, like drop a bomb over here. And, they're like, we need to know the exact disposition of everybody. And they like wanted all this information, and they wanted everything to be like super perfect and clean and
right.
sensible. And I was like, that's not a real thing in like fight in a combat situation.
And the tense part about this though, is you had accurate mortars or accurate artillery on them, which had to stop when the French came in, and you tried to wave the French. You tried to like tell command, no, we don't want them. Like we have rounds on.
You remember way back when we interviewed Dan Hampton, F-16 pilot, right. And he was talking about doing joint training with the French, and the French just took their toys and went home during the middle of this exercise because they were like, you can't, like they were doing an AAR, and they're like, you can't just call us out and say we messed up and we need to improve this and that. Like that's not cool. And they just up and left.
Oh God. Yeah. Maybe the bigger theme there, the French.
let's get on it.
Yeah. A lot of my favorite people is, a lot of the coalition, the coalition, right, is not really, their heart's not really in it over there.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? They're there, but they're there because, there's a lot of high level generals and political officials that have kind of shaken hands, and they're like, all right, we're there. But it's like, really there was maybe a handful of countries that were truly in the fight in Afghanistan, and French were definitely not one of them. So, the situation I was in, I was like, those pilots, they're only bad things can come from like them dropping bombs, right? Where it's like you could mess up. But if you do nothing, right, then nothing bad will happen to you.
Right. So
there's that whole kind of culture that I think a lot of the allies kind of approached it with over there. For me, what was so frustrating about that was like when you're winning and somebody's fucking it up.
Right.
You're winning and somebody's messing it up, and you don't have like that many opportunities to win, right? Like where you're like, we got this, like we have them dialed in, like we have them. And then you feel that like slipping away because you work so hard for that. Like, just again, to kind of bring it down to like a very like simple example, like you work so hard to lay the perfect ambush,
right,
and to like actually have the enemy like walk through your kill zone. I'm like, oh my god, like orgasm moment, right? And then somebody's screwing it up, like the guy on your left flank security team's over there sneezing and coughing,
right? He has hay fever
over there and like choke that dude to death,
right. Well, Hire did make that up to you though, right? By sending you like the infantryman's salvation, the infantryman's balm.
Oh my gosh. Well, the A10s, right? Like, oh dude, A10s. Oh god. Oh god. And maybe you guys probably know, like I kind of saw a bit about like the A10s being decommissioned, like they were going to take them out of service, and I think every like former like ground pounder was like, this is
every couple of years they try to do that.
Okay, yeah, okay. So they're still in the air. Well, yeah, that's okay. That's thanks, Jack.
There must have been like screams.
So yeah, we had some A10s. We had some A10s roll in, and American A10s, American pilots, and these dudes were just like, we want to kill everybody. Like they were ready to go, and we started dropping 500-pound bombs. We started rockets, chain gun, like everything, and like we had their positions like dialed in. And this A10, this dude came in, and he was like kamikazing into the mountain. Like, and they're built for that, right? They're built for like close, like ground support, but like what this dude did, I mean, it was amazing. I remember I could see the lettering. Like, the pilots have like their names stenciled in. Like he came in, I was like, fucking drop a bomb right here. And he came in, and I remember I could see the lettering.
Holy shit.
Like the pilot's name.
Yeah.
This dude was bad. Yeah, this dude was badass.
You can see the salad in his teeth from lunch as he like winks at you.
Yeah, like one of those, right?
Yeah.
And this dude, I mean, I blew up an entire mountain, like an entire mountain, and all the fucking Taliban on it, and it was awesome.
Yeah, and A10s are like awesome. Viagra for the infantry. Like everybody, like watching is like, yeah.
Yeah, but it was like, so here's the deal. You win, like you're gonna have days where you're winning, and you're gonna have days when you're not.
Yeah,
and that's the, I think for a lot of people like that were on the long tours, man, like when the wars were really hot.
Yeah,
that's it, man. It was like it was like a boxing match, man. It was like, some rounds you're scoring a lot, and you might knock them down, some rounds, you're getting knocked down, and you got to keep like getting up, and you got to keep going, man. So
yeah,
that was a win. That day was a win for us. And then I'm, felt fucking good.
Yeah,
it really did, you know, and I was like, I had people read their book, guys, and they were like, oh, like these dudes, there's no like remorse. And there's incredible remorse for like you guys, like we've been talking about. And I love the discussion about, like where I messed up and my guys got killed. But like the bad guys? No, dude,
Right.
no. There was never like,
Yeah.
never felt bad about that. You're like, this is, fuck you, man. You know, like that's.
Yeah, those kind of questions where people ask you, like, how do you reconcile, killing the enemy
Right,
or
it's
something?
like they were the bad guys.
What am I supposed to reconcile?
and then it gets turned around that you're a monster for not thinking that you're a monster for having that feeling.
And you've pointed out to me in the past, Dave, like it's almost like a consensual thing. Like you don't show up to the party if you don't want to dance.
Right.
Right.
You're there. I'm there. We all volunteered for this. Like there are no child soldiers out here. Right. Like we're all game.
Yeah.
Like let's rock and roll.
Yeah.
No, please
Yeah.
go ahead.
No, and that's where it's like, I don't expect anybody to feel sorry for me, man. And like,
Right.
And the guys that didn't come back, like I will always feel like sorrow about, them not making it, right. But like, I'm not, like I went into this with my eyes wide open and I knew what I wanted to do.
Right.
And again, like if you're the parents of somebody who lost their life, that's there's
Right.
Incredible sorrow, right? And it's like how can I like honor your son
Right.
forever?
Right.
But I'm not expecting anybody to feel sorry for me for what like what I was doing,
Right.
and or like the consequences for me,
Right.
right?
Right. Well, and it's like it's just like you went in with your eyes wide open. So did the guys who didn't come home. Like, the people that it's hard on aren't the people who are gone. It's the people who are left behind. And look, I don't want to be callous because I 100% like empathize with, people who did come home and maybe didn't come home whole or came home and they're struggling with it. I mean, I think we all have struggles. But it's like you say, you're not asking for pity.
Yeah. I mean, even the guys who didn't come home, like at the same time, we don't want to infantilize them. They were men.
Right.
They made a decision. They
Right.
made their choice, and they fought and they died honorably.
Right.
And we should respect them for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's well said, Jack. Absolutely. Yeah, agreed. Yeah, no pity. Yeah,
There's
no
a,
pity.
I don't know if you guys watch Barry or anybody watches Barry, but that dichotomy you talk about, the people going, where's the remorse? Barry's about a former Marine becomes a hitman, wants to become an actor, yada, yada, yada. Really, it's a smart show on HBO, but there's a brilliant scene where he's thinking back to his memories of his first kill, and actors are acting it out what they think happened, but it shows what civilians think, how those things go down, and what's actually going down in the foxhole.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's yeah. So I don't, and it's interesting, like what you're capable of, like psychologically, and but yeah, again, I believed in the cause. I wanted to be there.
Right.
I wanted to kill bad guys.
Right.
And yeah, like there was never a moment where I was like,
Oh, the humanity.
yeah, what have I done?
Right. Right.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
I mean,
you saw gory ass shit
Right.
that you're like, okay, that's stuck in there forever.
Right.
But
Right.
there's not, there wasn't like, oh.
Well, and there were enough times where you would see evidence of what these people, not just to Americans, but to other Afghanis or whatever, you go, okay, yeah, like they're oxygen thieves. They don't need to be here.
Yeah.
So, anyway, so what happens next for you then, in the grand scheme of things?
We just like the fight just spiraled, Dave. The fight spiraled, man. Like we went to like all out war. We really did. And I think, I mean, it was like, there's some horror. There was some horror there, man. But like, I think a lot of my friends that were there too, where you're like, we basically, there was a time where we kind of stopped doing all the coin, like hearts and minds stuff.
Right.
And just like, it was just like all out, like total war.
Right.
Right. And we essentially shut down this valley, and like it was just like the whole thing was just a giant shooting range. And you know, it was so freaking stressful to be in that situation where like we were in contact like 3 or 4 times a day, right? It was just and guys were getting hit like all over like just like heavy casualties on our side. You know, obviously we were inflicting a lot of damage on the enemy. But it went to like all out war, and it stayed that way for months, like until basically like winter really set in.
So if you guys have do you have about a company size element there?
Yeah. It's essentially like a rifle company. That's about it.
And how are you replacing those guys that are getting hit?
We were getting reinforcements, but it was slow. Like we had a lot of like the platoons were down to like 30, you know, like a platoon might be around like 30 with just, you know, injuries and just like the kind of replacements not feeding in very quickly. And then, you know, the other thing that was funny was like, we started, I don't know, like we got some like replacements too. That were like dudes that like had like, it was like heart problems and shit like that. Like, guys or like really serious like criminal backgrounds. It was like funny because like I think when the war started, it was like the bar was like super high,
right?
And then like it was like all these medical and like criminal waivers and stuff. And then, you know, a lot of those guys were like, "Yeah, give me the dudes who had like criminal background."
Right.
That's the guy I want, like being the one man into the house. But it's not the dude that like I necessarily want to hang out with on the weekend once we get home, but
Yeah, we don't want the Texas A&M honor grad from Ranger School going into the house.
Well, it's also that, you know, you just want somebody who's hard as nails, who because when you go in number one, you can't stop. Like you got to go in with purpose, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you want the dude who's got a chip on his shoulder.
Yeah,
right. Who wants to pick a fight?
Yeah.
Right, so that's what I definitely, you know, would say, like, let's go get that dude killed. We started, so we were trying to, like we were again, like our company was just kind of getting ground into the dirt, man. Like we were just, you know, like kind of replacement troops were slow to come, and for a while there, we were probably at like 60% strength, you know, like just trying to get, you know, new recruits in. And I think the worst thing in the world, like I told you guys earlier about like how I was so horrified of being like a new lieutenant being assigned to a unit that had just come back from combat. That was horrible. But the only thing that's worse than that is being a new dude, like dropped into the middle of a fight.
Yeah.
Like that is the worst freaking thing in the world in my mind. Like we're just like, so we had kids that were like getting dropped, like they were like right out of AIT.
It's like Band of Brothers, you know, where they talk about like after the Battle of Ardennes, and there's all these new guys who come into the company, and the older guys don't really want to get to know them. There's like that cultural split.
Yeah.
And they were basically like getting fucking kicked off of a helicopter into this like into a giant gunfight every single day. And it was like you see that in like the Vietnam movies too. You're like Cherry, I don't want to know your name.
Yeah, exactly. The big red one. Yeah.
Yeah, that always seems so like Hollywood, but it was like, you're like, oh, these dudes they're gonna like, I don't even know what to do with these dudes because they're so fucking clueless.
Right.
They're just gonna get killed. They're like a liability, you know. And that's not, again, I'm like generalizing, right? And like a lot of those guys that we got mid-tour end up being just awesome, like badasses, and like the way that
this is the salty PL talking.
But so like the mental adjustment to like get dropped in like that is, you know, I definitely that's not a position that you want to be in, you know. So
we nobody's ever like faulted AIT with preparing somebody too much for actual combat, right?
Yeah, they've kind of just been run through, like, check the block. Okay, you're ready. Like, you can kind of like fire a rifle straight, like,
Right.
have fun.
Right.
So we had some of that, and you got to like learn quick, man. And it was like kind of like starting over too, where you're like the guys that came over with us, like we were at this point, right? We were like 8, 9 months into this, man. And you've been doing, like, you're a fucking ninja,
Right?
Like, you can be like, dude, I can go walk around. I don't even need night vision. Like, I'll go walk around with my eyes closed on a mountainside in the dark,
Right.
Like, just do some badass shit. And like dude's ability, like guys, their ability, like under fire to just, just throw down. I mean, just like incredible skill level, competence, coming out of people. But then you get, again, you're always like strong as your slowest guy or your weakest guy, right? So then you end up like kind of starting over again when some of these kids who are like, okay, like, so you're like, okay, like, I want, I know first squad, like, they don't have any new dudes yet. So like, like, I want first squad up front, or, we're going to give them the kind of hard missions, and you want to be careful with that and not just kind of running your salty dudes in the ground.
Right.
But, you gotta work around those new guys.
Right.
And try to like give them opportunities to integrate, and hopefully you don't take them in like way over their head, which is so fucking easy to do.
Right.
In an environment like that.
Right. I mean, one, they didn't have the chance to do the workups, the train ups, to bond with the team, and two, like, everybody is a well-oiled machine by this point.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you're all like, you have like, I mean, your ability to, like, you could just look at a guy and he's like, okay, like, you're doing that like Jedi shit with each other.
Right.
You just like, you're totally like dialed in with each other, and it's awesome. And I mean, I got this in my Ranger platoon where like you could do some incredibly complex things, and there'd be like 4 words said over the radio.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's like, oh God, it feels good. That's so cool. And like, you could do all this badass shit and like nobody even talks. Like, God, man, that feels good. I miss those days. Obviously the new guys, when you are talking to them, it's like, you fucking idiot.
Right.
You're fucking this all up. You're making too much noise.
Yeah.
But yeah, we ended up, but in reality, like, we ended up, some of our best guys like ended up coming in kind of mid tour. And then again, like, once the ones that end up being solid, they bring that new energy in. Right. Where, like, mentally, man, and physically, I mean, you just start getting you're just chipping away, man. It's chipping away at your body and your soul, your energy. It's just every day, man, you have a little less of it,
Yeah.
So how did this deployment end up winding down? And were you counting the days down like in one of those Vietnam flicks from back in the old days where you're like, oh man, I only got 4 weeks left. Am I going to make it?
Yeah. Well, so we got extended. Mm-hmm. I won't take you through all that, man. It was a slog. It ended up being almost 16 months. That's 16.
That's crazy.
Months. Yeah. And it, so we had a window where we kind of went back into like actually doing real, like, kind of like nation building, infrastructure project stuff. And that was the winter time when, I think a lot of the outside, like Al Qaeda, the foreigners kind of left for a while. And we used that opportunity to try some other things, but we got extended and we kind of got into the fighting season again. And that was really difficult, because after we got extended, I mean, we were basically on the verge of going home. Like, we already had like the advanced party was back in the States, and then they kind of turned everybody around and said,
"Wow,
just 3 more months, man.
Kick in the balls."
What a tease.
That was horrible, and then that was, I think that was kind of like mentally that was the hardest time of the deployment, because you felt like you had made it, and then. And you felt like you're like, all right, like this is the guys I get to take home. And and then we got it deployed, and then we had some casualties at kind of toward the end.
Right.
So those ones hurt really bad.
Right.
Where it was like, damn, man, we were done. But I'll tell you this: my last firefight in the Korengal Valley, we went guns only, no mortars, no artillery, no air, no nothing. It was like, fuck it, dude. Let's just have a gunfight, like at the end. And that was an intentional choice. Felt pretty good. I'm glad I did it like that. It was kind of our last like shootout was we just went guns only.
So you were just like, we're a bunch of gangsters and we're gonna go mix it up with some bad actors and whatever happens.
It was just like, it was almost like honoring them too. Mm-hmm. You were like, I just, again, like, I don't know if I'm not like kumbaya with anybody over there, but I do have respect for them as a light infantry force, and it just kind of felt like let's just have a straight up like a shootout. Like you guys don't have air, you don't have mortars at this immediate moment. They had artillery, or they had mortars at least, but it was just like let's just have not like a fair fight, but like let's just kind of keep it like just us boys out here,
gentlemen rules
for this last. Yeah. And I don't know, man. It seemed like a good idea at the time.
Yeah.
Nobody got hurt, but it was just kind of like, it was sort of about respecting kind of that last, we knew it was our last firefight. Mm-hmm. Cause we'd already been extended once. So I was like, they can't possibly extend us to like 2 years.
I'm glad nobody said that out loud though.
Right. Yeah.
That's like saying, I've got 2 weeks to retirement.
Yeah.
So what was it like returning home? I mean, was it a difficult readjustment back to the land of Walmart?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. And this is a big theme in the book. And I lay this out there for people of like these like quick, in World War II, right? Like you would, you're going to war, you get on a ship and you're like whole units together, and there was this long journey and it was this long thing, and like you had all this time to adjust. But modern wars, like these very quick back and forth, so I remember it was just like coming home from that, like it was been so intense that it was, man, I was not right, for like a long time.
Yeah. And there, like, I definitely, like, we've kept you, and I want to get into your time at battalion and everything. But you do talk a lot about that, and very personally about how you dealt with that. And, it's very powerful.
Let's talk about Ranger Battalion for the bonus segment.
Oh, for the bonus segment? Okay.
Yeah. And we have a bunch of user questions to hit up.
Yeah. And just so you guys know, you did 2 or 3 tours with regiment overseas. 3, right?
Yeah.
And you spent a good time there. But the majority of this book is about your time with 10th Mountain, which I think is really important, because I mean, what's sort of right? And you do say some great stuff about your time at Ranger Battalion, but what's sort of right about doing raids every single night? Where it all feels the same after a while, right?
Yeah, I think it was a little less. Yeah, it was a little less unique to me.
Right.
That experience, but I obviously I focus on the things in the book that I thought were like, hey, there's this I think there's bigger lessons here, or this is sort of, this is an adventure story that I think other people will enjoy.
Yeah.
But yeah, I a lot of the book is that first tour in Afghanistan, because I think that was fairly far out there, like way outside the standard deviations. Like we were way off the bell curve, man.
Right.
So,
right. And And so we'll talk about the time at Regiment in the bonus segment for those of you who are our Patreon supporters. And if you're not, maybe you should check us out because we might even throw some friendly shade on a brethren service.
Oh, you mean naval infantry?
I don't know. It's totally
Naval
up to
infantry?
Ray.
It's a flawed concept from the get-go, folks. Think
Friendly
about it.
shade.
Think about it. We March at Midnight is the book. Guys, go check it out on Amazon or wherever books are sold. You can find this bad boy. Let's hit some viewer questions here.
Yeah.
Before we roll out tonight.
Let's see here. You know what? It does this. I don't know why it does this. I'm gonna have to go to the other thing to get the old ones.
So,
do you want to start
folks,
from the bottom going up?
Yeah, sure. So in Patton's journals from World War II, when he was in combat, he would write entries like, "I have never been so happy." Andrew says, that doesn't surprise me about Patton. Let's see.
I think that's true for a lot of soldiers, though, that there is a purity to combat, right? That there's I don't want to say that everybody's happy, but there's a joy that can be found there, or a camaraderie and a sense of purpose that it's hard to replicate someplace else.
Andrew is asking, did you have mules with you at this point in Afghanistan?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah, we relied on mules for resupply.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah, we did. We did do we went to training for that, and then we ended up, we used.
So they would have a mule resupply train coming up the mountain to drop off MREs and shit for you guys?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, we did mules, man. We did that. It was local mules. Like, we basically were like, hey, local dude, we'll give you some money, and then we kind of rigged them up and stuff, but we were using local mules. It wasn't like we didn't have like a official army, mule skinner unit or anything like that. But yeah, we did.
That's pretty cool.
Yep.
Ray, if you were
Old school, man.
Yeah.
If you had kept a journal during this, would there ever have been an entry or something close to "I've never been so happy"?
Oh, I don't know, man. There was definitely like ecstasy on like tactical wins.
Mm-hmm.
There was ecstasy, but I don't think there was anything like that. I don't know. It's a interesting question. I think for the grunt, most of the time you're just freaking tired.
Mm-hmm.
You're so smoked, man. You're just tired, and you're like, when it's over, you're happy, but you're like, all right, it's like on the next thing of like, all right, like cross-load ammo, and what's the next up mission, or like we need to consolidate positions. So I didn't really have time to kind of sit around and reflect on like how happy I was.
Well, because you weren't a general. Generals get to do that.
DJ says, Jack and Dave, great work. Ray, more thoughts on Texas A&M. Words for young fish listening in, especially Texas A&M's legacy pre-Ranger school program, Rudders. Great writing, both books.
Oh, nice, man. Dude, yeah, like I it's cool you're doing Rudders. That's an awesome program. It's sort of a pre-Ranger school, right, for those that aren't familiar with it. And I say just like get all the training you can get, like sign up for everything, man. Like, I went to mountaineering school when I was with the Army. I like, there was nothing I did not take advantage of. And there's some good, what I learned the most from was from like old NCOs, man. Old NCOs when I was at Texas A&M. There was a Master Sergeant, Victor Hoyos, who taught me a lot. So listen to those NCOs and like go to every school, every training thing you can.
Andrew says, what is the longest a conventional unit has been deployed? And I don't know the answer to that question, honestly. Do you guys?
Well, yeah, I mean, it like GWAT era, I think 16 months is the longest.
Yeah.
You go back to World War II, man. I mean, some of those dudes were deployed for, like, those units were overseas for like several years.
Yeah.
Like 2-3 years. Yeah,
when you went to the war, you went to the war.
Yeah, that was it. But you were also like hanging out in like Britain for like a long time. You weren't hanging out in like a platoon fire base for 3 years, right? So
I'll guess some, and I'll work back towards you. Did you and we can talk about a little bit more of that, but did you work with any of the CT units, chiefly CAG, HRT, and Super SEALs? What were your experiences like with them? Rangers seem to talk highly of the former two, whereas the latter has mixed opinions.
Yeah, I did. I worked with all the super secret squirrel, like black side guys, and I don't know, man. Oh gosh, yeah.
Say it how it is. Say it how it is, Ray. Say what you want to say.
I'll tell you this: a lot of Delta dudes are former Ranger Regiment guys. Like that's a big feeder, like into the regiment. Right. So it was always like this, like big brother, little brother kind of thing that you see that in like Black Hawk Down. I thought that movie did a good job of kind of depicting that relationship. SEAL team, the SEAL team's very, very different cultures, very different like approach to just tactics. And so not a good fit, man. Not a good fit. Like, for me personally, I struggle with a lot of things with, kind of working for the SEALs. Some of that's just like military, like inter-service rivalry. That's a reality. We don't all get along. We really do not. But a lot of love and respect for the other, especially for the, kind of the tier one guys on the Army side.
Not to get too much into it now, but did you, I'm sure you appreciated it when somebody from the Super SEALs offered to be the QRF commander of your QRF force.
Yeah, right. Well, so we were working with the SEALs, Super SEALs, and then I won't tell the whole story, but what started happening, like kind of later in Afghanistan, was the mission started drying up. And we wanted to do ops, like we wanted to do cool ass missions. And when the mission started drying up, then like the inter-service rivalry and like all the beef got even worse, right? Because it was just like there just wasn't a lot of action to go around, so it just brought out kind of the worst in people. I'll put it like that, Dave.
What's life like as an officer in battalion?
It's good. It's easy. It's easy, man. You can do soft touch leadership. And I loved it, man. I had a superstar Ranger platoon sergeants. I was a ground force commander and had superstar like platoon leaders that I was working with, superstar NCOs, and I loved it, man. It was awesome. It was easy. It was fucking easy, quite honestly. Like I was proficient and physically, fit, and it was awesome, man. The big Army was hard because you had those like long tours and experiences, and you had to lift people up a lot. Mm-hmm. And I never had to lift anybody up in the Rangers, man. And that's just like that kind of leadership where you're having to like lift people up who are quitting, mm-hmm. who can't do it anymore, that kind of thing. That's a lot harder than just like running a big team of super high performers.
In Ranger Battalion, you're trying to hold them back as a PL more often than not.
Yeah.
Yeah. Keep your Spec 4 Mafia in check.
For Jack, Dave, and Ray, do you guys feel the U.S. will struggle to recruit international assets after leaving Afghan assets in a mess? It's come out publicly in like the Washington Post now. We got a lot of our Afghan assets out of the country. We did shut down the embassy in Kabul, so it's going to be pretty difficult to recruit assets going into the future. I don't know. Do either of you guys have any comment on that?
Oh man, I know that like being a young platoon leader, doing like coin and like kind of walking into villages and being like, hey, kind of like you want to be on our team. That's like if we try that again anytime soon, that will be a difficult conversation for those platoon leaders, those guys on the ground, for whatever that next country is where we're fighting, to kind of go, hey, play on our team. I imagine that will be harder. but the circumstances I think all aren't necessarily going to be the same. So yeah, it's sort of hard to answer that question, specifically, just because of like all the different conditions and variables.
Did you ever stumble upon an ancient artifact?
We saw not artifacts necessarily, and we saw a lot of wildlife, like mountain lions.
Really?
Yeah, like seeing a mountain lion under night vision, like when you're already like super smoked, you're sitting on the side of a mountain, like tired as shit, and you're like, am I really seeing that?
Like how big were these fuckers?
They were good size. Like I didn't see snow leopards, but they were in that's their habitat. Like the snow leopards are out there, man. But we saw mountain lions, and I'll tell you, Jack, they look big as shit under nods. Like,
Yeah.
they look like they could eat all of us.
Yeah.
Man. Oh, dude, I'm gonna light it up.
Yeah, it's like when you see a shark in the ocean, it's like you realize what an apex predator really looks like.
Yeah. But with if you actually weighed that thing, it's probably not a 1,000-pound animal, but it sure as hell looks scary in the moment.
Yeah, but no Hand of Vecna or Ark of the Covenant or anything good like that, huh? From ancient Babylonia.
Oh man, we'd find weird stuff doing, especially in Iraq, doing like you go raid a house and then you toss the place SSE shit, right, looking for intel, and like I don't know, we'd find like crazy stuff like emeralds and like wealth, like real wealth that people had over there. It was like stuff like that was pretty interesting, but no like Indiana Jones stuff.
Was being shy ever an obstacle you had to overcome as being a platoon leader? If so, how did you deal with it, particularly being a leader in Ranger Battalion?
Yeah, it was like, it was hard to, not like you just like very self-conscious, right? Where you're like, I don't want to sound stupid.
Right.
Like, I don't want to sound stupid, and that was really bad in my first unit. By the time, like, where you're just like, you're very insecure. Mm-hmm. And by the time I got to Ranger Battalion, I felt like, I'd been through such a horrendous tour, and I know all the Ranger Battalion dudes are badass, right? But I was just like, I've fucking been way more firefights than I think probably anybody here, except for, maybe the senior E7s.
Right.
So I was less worried about it there, but yeah, especially being like a new, like PL, it's kind of hard to find your voice. So you lead by example, right? You go on every patrol, like right. You get out there and you do the hard missions, and you get wet and you get dirty, and like you get out there and sort of like actions, not words. So that's how I cope with that.
Do you think that it was that shyness or that sort of insecurity or wanting to fit, you wanted to fit in, that sort of precipitated you almost losing your job prior to your first operation, the big blow up from the TOC?
Yeah. Hey, is my audio okay,
yeah.
Guys? I just had to make a little quick switch. Okay, cool. So I think, like I was also like, when you're new, you're kind of insecure,
right? And
I got like kind of familiar, like your NCOs that are actually like kind of friendly. it's easy to kind of get like real, almost like a little too, nice with them, and a little too like casual and relaxed. And that actually got me kind of in big trouble.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're looking to belong in the platoon.
Right.
But there's really a fine balance, man. And you're not there to be everybody's fucking buddy.
Yeah.
And it's
hard, like, because you're all by yourself. Like, it's a lonely position.
Right. Yeah. Where you're like, if you're a squad leader, right, you got 3 other buddies that are just, it's like instant connection. And then, yeah. So for the platoon leaders, right, like your buddies are kind of your other platoon leaders.
Right.
But in Afghanistan in particular, and for many in Iraq too, it was like, platoons are kind of out there on their own. So like, you really are, right. It's kind of you. And who you end up like getting to know really well, and this is 100% true for me, is your RTO. And your RTO is like, kind of turns into the guy that's like always in the room with you, kind of hearing all the same radio traffic. He's hearing the orders, this crazy fucking orders come over the radio, just like right there in the moment with you. And you're like, it's hard not to be like totally stoic with your RTO. Like you kind of let him see like the human side of you. You're like, oh my fucking God, really?
Right. He sees that reaction that you have to the bullshit orders before you pass them on to your troops, like you 100% support them.
Before you filter it.
Before you go, yes,
right.
I believe in this, you know.
Right.
He sees you going, fuck, God, fucking damn it, not again, son of a bitch.
Yeah. And we did not talk about that story. It's a great story, and it, it has kind of a follow-on. So if you want to get the full story, get the book We March at Midnight by Ray McPadden on Amazon. Are you on Prime on the
Amazon
Prime?
Yeah. Every outlet, all the major outlets, the book's available, audiobook, hard copy, digital, everything. Yeah.
And there's also your novel out there. What is it? The Whole Mountain Burned?
Yeah, and The Whole Mountain Burned. Yeah, that was my first book. It won the national award from the American Library Association. Best military novel of the year. It was 2019. Yeah.
I'll tell you, like one of the great things about your book is the action reads like a fiction book, and I say that in the best way because it's very
vivid.
It's very vivid, and it'll put you on the edge of your seat when you're reading it, or the edge of your bed if you're lying down. However, but I highly recommend it. It's a phenomenal read.
Yeah, thanks. I wanted it to be an adventure story, like first and foremost, and I really wanted the person to like be in the foxhole with like next to me or like be on the patrol. And it's like what I was looking for, like as a young guy, where I was like, I was hungry for like books that were real and that were like, really put you there in the moment. And so that's what I wanted to create.
You do even more than that, because I have the same praise for your book that I have for Andy Milburn's book, which is people don't really understand the weight of leadership in the military for an officer, and the effect of the decisions that you make, and not just the effect out there in the world, like what happens to the troops that you're commanding, but what happens internally, and how do you wrestle with those, never knowing what the right answer might have been.
Yeah, the weight of it is incredible. And it's, like you hear generals like saying shit like that, and you're like, whatever. But like when it's like you told that kid to do what, like, okay, like go over there to that house, and then he died. Mm-hmm. Right? Like that's a whole nother level of, where you're like, was that the right thing to do? And so that's, it's always there. I said this before, it's always going to be there, man, where you kind of carry that around the rest of your life.
Right. And if you'd made a different decision, like I said, move the patrol base, and guys got hit going to get resupply, your thought would be, I shouldn't have moved with the patrol base.
Did we get all the user questions?
Almost. When we were talking about marriage, when strippers and whatnot, isn't there a reason why German soldiers used to have to get their CO's blessing to marry?
No shit, I didn't know that.
I didn't know that either.
That's cool. I mean, I don't know. I mean, we're Americans. The idea of like, the chain of command telling you who can marry, I think that wouldn't go very far. But I do think that a lot of guys, you kind of have the kind of like hasty marriages, like right before, deployments, and a lot of guys got ruined by that kind of thing, man. So you gotta be careful.
Yeah. In the Gurkhas, they don't let guys marry on their first enlistment.
Well, I mean, the Marine Corps thing, their whole thing in like boot camp was, if the Marine Corps wanted you to have a wife, we would have issued you one. And then in the Navy, I don't know how it is now, but it used to be very strict that the ship's captain would not allow when they would go to like the Philippines or whatever, the ship's captain would not allow his young sailors fresh out off the farm from Arkansas, or whatever. Do they have farms in Arkansas? I don't know. But to marry like a woman, from Manila or from Phuket or from wherever else, because they go out and they fall in love with the first woman who really gives them a lot of attention.
What's
Yeah.
I think that's it.
okay?
Unless there's anything new that's
Cool.
come in.
Jerry says, I love rock climbing. When I see videos, my hands start sweating. You're an awesome guy. So guys, next week is Mick Mulroy is going to be on the show next Friday. He's a former Marine and served as a CIA paramilitary officer. And he also, I'm going to butcher it, I believe he was a counterterrorism advisor to the National Security Council during the Trump administration. So he's a very interesting guy, and we're excited to have him on the show. This has been a lot of fun, Ray. I'm really glad that you wrote this book, and I'm really happy that we were able to have you on the show tonight. And I hope our viewers will go and check out this book.
Yeah, you guys definitely should. Like, it's a great read. You'll enjoy it.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Jack, Dave, I'm a big fan of both of you guys again, and thanks for having me on. This was really fun.
Thanks, man.
We're a big fan of yours.
And we want to, and please stick around. I want to have you on the bonus segment to talk about Ranger Battalion. But I think that's all we got for tonight for the.
You want to get into this because, we don't want to keep you for too long.
Good, man. You don't have to
But I was telling Jack.